Are haunted houses for real? Well, I've taken a little bit of time lately to talk to some brokers, and I'm about to interview an agent who has a haunted house story. Stay tuned. All right, everyone. I just want to say that I'm going to be welcoming a guest today, a special guest. We're going to talk about haunted houses. And I've been wanting to do a video where somebody shares their story about maybe an experience with a haunted house. We're in the housing business. We see a lot of houses. We do deal with a lot of experiences over the years. There's another broker in my town who I was dying to tell her story, but she's a little nervous about sharing it because it's fresh still on her memory and it's an intense story. So she didn't want to, put this all out there and document it at this time. But today I have with me a very special guest, Diane Curtis from New Jersey with eXp Realty. Her and I got on a call the other day because she heard I was looking for some stories, and she's got a fascinating story about a particular house that she feels strongly is haunted. And as we were kind of sharing, Diane's been in the business for about 25 years. She's an industry vet. So her and I had a lot to connect on. We've all had our stories, or maybe we felt weird going into a house. Do houses have energy? Do they have, stories to tell for themselves, and so we're heading into the Halloween season. I thought how appropriate it would be to maybe have a little fun and different type of video on, are houses haunted? Do we believe houses are haunted? I'd love to get your feedback. If you hear this story and you're like, oh, I have a story too, I would love to hear it. I have a small fascination with this sort of thing. So Diane was nice enough to say, yes, I will tell my story. And she's got an interesting one. So Diane, let's just get into it. So you told me this incredible story about, several years ago.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yes. Hi. So this is my haunted house story that was my experience. It's not hearsay. It's, but, and I actually contacted my client that was actually experiencing it with me, and we kind of figured it out. It was around 2000, maybe 1999 at the earliest. Okay. So it's a good amount of time back. And so what happened at the time, and this, if I could bring you back in a timepiece, was that Realtor.com just got on, just became popular. Okay. I was one of the first agents at the time to sign on to Realtor.com, even though I had no idea what Realtor.com was about. Like, I was like, okay, I just got to know it's happening. Right.
Yeah.
But my client, Joan, she teaches computers. She's a whiz. She would know that. So she would see things online and tell me about it. Like, how do you know this? She goes, it's on Realtor.com. And so she wanted to see, because she wanted a house with property. Okay. So if I could almost place you in New Jersey, I am, the communities I serve are with a commutability to New York City. So they've been expensive for a long time. They have, direct trains, buses, then there's a large amount of corporations around us. So it's an in-demand community. So even 20 years ago, that week that she had said she wanted to see this particular house, I had been in that same community, only a few blocks away from where I was going to show. And there was a knockdown listed for $900,000.
And back then that was cheap, right?
Well, to be knocking it down at 900, they'd have to list the new house at like 3 times that amount at least, right?
And that was a lot for 20 plus years ago.
But 20 years ago. I mean, but this particular community, and again, I don't want to say communities, I don't want to say streets, because I don't want to get in trouble. But in this community, this was like standard, right? And so at 900,000, this was, I just went through what they were proposing as a knockdown, right? And so she sends me she calls me, says she wants to see this house. I go look it up on the MLS, and it's on for $719, but it looked pretty nice. It was like decor, like level of the 1970s. I was like, but it still didn't make sense, because it had the acres, it was a colonial, it had the bedrooms, it had the sunroom, it had all these things, right?
Right.
I was like, something's up. She goes, I want to see it. It looks, it looks good. Okay. So I make the appointment, we go, and we brought her kids with us. And it was like that after school time. And so we were between after school and her kids having to go to swim practice and stuff. And at that time, I think I had to rush home for my kids too. There was definitely a time compression that we had to see this house get in, get out, right?
Yeah.
As soon as I step into the house, I feel an anger that I was like, and I turned to her and I go, do you feel this? Right? And she said, yeah. But she was like going through the house, right?
Yeah.
The anger was palatable.
Wow.
Okay. So.
And was this house vacant?
It was, let me lead up to that. It was
Okay.
partially vacant. You could feel like one person was moved in and one person was still there. You know, moved in and one was out.
Yeah.
So it was partially, and I mean, like piecing it, I felt like there was a divorce, but it came to fruition at the end. But we're going through, and every room is nice size. The only thing, like for me, and it's a particular bugaboo for me, when I walked in, you could see all the rooms, but every room had a different floor pattern, parquet, rug, linoleum, like it was a mishmash, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, but that's all cosmetic. It could be taken care of. So we're going into every room, and I am analytical by nature, and I'm still processing. How is this listed at 700 when that other house is at 900, and this is what's going, and that's being knocked out. So I'm going through. Then we go up to the master bedroom. The master bedroom's huge, walk-in closet, bed, the whole thing, and I'm in disbelief.
Yeah.
I think at this point I start muttering, "No dead bodies here." Right?
Yeah.
So then we get down to the finished basement area, and it's Berber carpets. It's actually probably the nicest decored place of the whole house. And now I'm going through the closet going, "No dead bodies here." No, right? To the point that Joan's son said, "Mrs. Curtis, please stop saying that. You're freaking me out." Right? So, so what happened was, we're like noticing the time and we have to skedaddle. She goes, "I gotta go. Get me the seller's disclosure." She had to go with her kids and I'm like heading back. "Okay, I'll get you the seller's disclosure." But in my head, I'm like, something's not adding up.
Yeah.
So I run home, and at the time, you got to understand this too. So I called the listing agent, and I said, "What is going on here?"
Yeah.
Right? What is going on here? And they said to me, the agent who was at that time, because I'm in the business 30 years, I've never seen anything like it. It's the most egregious divorce. Sorry, my dog's all of a sudden.
Okay, my dog's in the room too, and he's like, "What is that sound?"
What is that sound? It's the most egregious divorce she's ever witnessed. There's so much hate. Hold on, let me let one out. Maybe this might.
Yeah. Go for it. You're okay. We have a little dog intermission, making sure our dogs don't totally interrupt.
My daughter dropped her dog off. So anyway,
so you're asking the agent, like, what's
so
going on in the house?
I'm on the phone with the agent, and if you could picture this at the time, I'm literally, stirring a pot of tomato sauce on the phone with the agent. I have the fax machine going, and so I said, "Well, can you please?" She's telling me that, and I go, "Can you please send me the seller's disclosure?" And as she's sending it, it's coming out in those rolls.
Old school, long rolls of paper coming out of the fax.
And she goes, "Wait, before you go, I want to tell you something." I get a beep, beep, beep. There's my Joan on the other line, my client on the, I gotta go, my client's on the other line. So I hang up, and I'm now looking at because she says as she leaves, "Look at the bottom of the disclosure." Okay. So I go to the bottom of the disclosure, and now I'm on the phone with Joan, and Joan says, "Did you see the plaque at the end of the driveway?"
That's your client said that?
Yes, but she's leaving, I'm leaving. She noticed the plaque, and the plaque said, "This house is built on a burial site of unnamed soldiers from, I guess, colonial times."
Wow.
So and as she's saying it, I'm reading it on the disclosure. I was like, there are the dead bodies. So it really was. But the crazy thing is that Joan said to me, "I want to bring Walter back." She wants to bring her husband back. I go, "Really?" Yeah. That's a lot of houses. Okay. So fortunately, we do bring Walter back, and Walter, it was now like the fall leaves were going, and you know, the traffic sounds were, you could hear it from the highway, right? So I was like, shoot, thank goodness, because I couldn't rest with that. But it's funny, I called her to kind of, remember a few things, like what year it was, and it was around 1999, 2000. And I said, she goes, oh yeah, I remember that specifically. She goes, I go, but you didn't really respond to I go, I remember feeling it. So she goes, oh, I did too. But she goes, I thought you'd think I was nuts. I was like, okay, but we still kept on going. But anyway, and I've been in other houses that were purported to be haunted where I didn't feel anything. This was definitely a specific thing. And then the other issue was that I kind of kept an eye, and Joan referenced that. Remember, we'd keep an eye to see how many times it'd be on the market. Now, back then, the MLS used to report all the way back from when they were recording. So recently, when I look back at that same house, and I look, it doesn't go all the way back to the beginning. It didn't even show it when it listed when I showed it. But even in that short of time, well, short of 20 years or so, it showed that it was on the market 11 times.
Wow.
And
That's
in
not
real
telling.
estate, that's not typical.
Nope.
That's not typical. If someone moves every 8 years, this country standard, right? That might be 3 times, might be typical.
Right.
Might be typical.
Yeah.
So
11 times is unheard of.
Right. But you know what? It was 11 times withdrawn.
Ooh.
So people, whoever, I don't know who stuck with it or not. The recent pictures were nice. They did change the flooring like I would have done. It looks nicer, but it's been on and off.
It's all good. Don't worry about it.
Okay. It's been on and off for 11 times just within the past 10, 15 years. So,
wow.
So, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of us who've been in the industry a long time. We've experienced a lot, right? We can, I've gone into many houses where literally, and this is a common thread, you guys, is you go into a house and instantly you just feel the energy shift. It's hard to explain. And whether you're like a spiritual person or you're just don't even like tune into that stuff, that is the common response in like, not just haunted houses, but sometimes just going through a doorway, you're like that, you just feel an energy shift that's hard to explain.
Conversely, when Joan ended up buying the house at that time period, right? We walked into the house that she bought and grabbed my arm. We didn't even get past the hallway. And she says, call Walter. I want to make an offer. Like, you got to get Walter in here, right?
Yeah.
This is our husband, right? So I said, can we at least see the kitchen?
Yeah.
Before we write an offer. And that she had a vision of her daughter who was in grade school for her prom pictures. That's what immediately came to her mind. And the house that was filled with a family, it was love. They were there forever. It wasn't, updated or anything fancy, but there was a great energy there.
Yeah.
So you do have
you do
the pros and the cons where, oh my God, this is a great place to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Conversely, it can be positive energy versus the negative stuff. So
right.
Yeah.
And I was mentioning, I think on the other call too, when we initially were talking about it, when I had turned, right before I turned 40, there was a horrible domestic violence issue in my neighborhood where someone got murdered. Okay. And it was horrific. And the neighbors were cringing. There were makeshift, those memorial sites with teddy bears and flowers.
Yeah.
To the point that the neighbors who had children said, please don't do this anymore because it's disturbing the whole community. So when they actually put it on the market, I was intent on getting a builder who would knock that house down and start from scratch.
Okay.
So I reached out and I actually called the board to say, do I have to disclose that there was a murder there? What do I have to do? And they said, yes, you do. So I said, okay. So I told the builders and I told them that was my intent, why I wanted it to, I'm, looking for people who specialize in knocking down and building new. And so So I was out, it was my 40th birthday celebration with my high school friends. We're doing a spa treatment. And I come back, and I get the phone call. And this is what this is how long ago that was, my heavy duty Motorola phone, you know. And I had little power left, but the contractor at the time says, yeah, I'd like to see it. The stress, knowing that I was going into this place where terrible violence occurred. And so I was anticipating it, and I knew the woman who was murdered, and she was a sweet lady, and I just remember her smile. And when I walked, I was so tense, like everything from the spot treatment was erased. The next day I go and I show it, and I had nightmares. I was just worried about it. And I go in, and it was peaceful.
Weird.
And I think it was one of those things that the energies just went, you know, like they all, you know, like, and yeah, so like you'd think something would have it and others wouldn't. And you'd think colonial soldiers, you know, from so many decades back would be at peace, but no.
It does make you wonder. We don't know what that all looks like, but yeah. That's fascinating.
Right. I mean, and there's another house in the community. It's not my story because I never showed this particular house, but they said if you showed it with children, that there was a ghost in the house, and that she goes, go show that house with kids in tow, the clocks start moving. Like, so I don't know. That house is a beautiful house. I would be sad that if it was that, but I never had the opportunity to show it. But I mean, those are rumors.
Right.
But the first story that's my story.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's, I think there's a general curiosity for this element. I don't come across it very often, really, thank God, you know, in our business. But every once in a while, I'll talk to a colleague or I'll hear a story from somebody in the industry who said, wow, you know, this is, something's going on with this house, and they share their story, and it's, you know, to them, it's kind of undeniable how they've gone through this process. And, you know, I think you and I shared the other night just a few things we'd heard of in the industry. I remember an agent about a couple of years ago was sharing something on a private Facebook group for local realtors, how she sold this house, and 2 or 3 weeks into having sold it, her buyers were like, we got to get out of here. There's something going on with this house. It's haunted. And come to find out that it had been a hospice years prior. So, you know, who knows, right? Like nobody really knows how all this stuff really works, but there's something that can go on with houses in this nature. And so, yeah, I have a general curiosity for these stories, especially as we're heading into kind of Halloween. And
I do too. I'm glad we had this opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Diane. It's been a pleasure. I thank you for the time you take today. And again, if anybody hears these stories or knows of somebody, we'd love to kind of hear what their story is. Again, we don't run across this a lot, so don't be worried that it's like a common theme in real estate, but every once in a while we hear these stories, and it definitely makes us kind of, you know, open up our minds and see, like, you know, what else is going on with houses. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, and hope you guys have a great Halloween season.
Take care. Okay.